Hi, I'm John Atack, and yet again, I have the wonderful Karen de la Carriere as my guest. And we're going to talk about, I want to pick up a word actually, which is used by many former Scientologists, and that's the word blow. That when somebody leaves Scientology, they have blown from Scientology. I'd just like to point out they haven't, because Hubbard packed this word together to have this sinister meaning in it, which is that you've committed overts, you have transgressions, crimes, what have you, and that's why you have to leave. And this comes from a man who spent his life traveling the globe, escaping from people, which is a little bit of an irony. So we're going to talk about somebody who left Scientology, and we have a thrilling story to tell. So if you would like to proceed. And
John, you didn't let me give you a hello.
Oh, hello.
John.
Hello,
John. Huggies. John. Hi, everybody. Yes. Today, the story is a thriller.
John le Carré.
It's a blow story, an escape. Not easy to escape. You see, Scientology anticipates CO members want to blow. Hence, they hire teams of security guards that circle the campus you are on, whether in Sydney, Australia, or South Africa, in Los Angeles. They're on bikes. At in-base, they call them rovers. They're on sort of ATV. It's absolute prison.
Yeah.
And they need security to chase you and bring you back.
Yeah.
Mark Headley's start of his book, he was chased, and literally his little motorbike that he was riding on to escape was bumped off the road into the gully. Anyway.
And then let me just say that I absolutely love Mark Headley's book. I have read tens of books by former members, and they're all of them fascinating to me. But his has two stories in it, which I think are the funniest stories I've ever read, I think. One about the kid who's called Power, and the other about David Miscavige and the cameraman having his camera on Shelley's cleavage instead of on Miscavige when he made his great declaration about attacks. But great book. I absolutely recommend it.
Yeah. So blow and escape are what CO members think about a lot. So imagine belonging to a group where you spend part of your day plotting on how to escape. Ron Miscavige, rest in peace. Ron Miscavige, father of David Miscavige, took 6 months of plotting.
Yeah.
He said he wired it down to a SEAL Team 6 operation. He had to time it, and the cameras watching, and how to leap the thing. So it isn't just that you leave like most religions. It's not that you just walk out the door. It's that they chase you down like they have the powers of federal marshals. John, that's a type of control, huh? You're leaving, but they believe you still belong to them.
I had Ken Hoden and another guy fly up to Oakland in California from the base to try and recover a woman who had managed to escape. And I somehow got called in to be there to guard her from these people. It was a terrifying experience because Ken Hoden was incredibly threatening. But at the end of, I've told this story before, but the woman's mother had made him a cup of coffee, and it was a single cup, and it was on a drip percolator. And the woman's husband came and said, "Right, we're done, we've got to go." And Ken Hoden, he then reminded Ken that he had this cup of coffee, and it came straight from the coffee maker. So it will have been, I think it run at sort of 86 degrees centigrade or something, which is not far off boiling. He took the cup of coffee, no milk, nothing in it, poured it down his throat and left. And I realized that he was more frightened of me than I was of him. It's like, oh, the terrible suppressive OT, such nonsense. But I wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, actually, I would hurt a fly, to be honest. I have been known to hurt flies, but I wouldn't hurt a human being. We all know that. So, but, and including Ken Hoden, the man who invented the word unconscionable, which he used on a BBC documentary. It's unconscionable what they say about my religion. Okay, Ken.
Poor Ken Hoden.
Poor Ken Hoden.
They discarded him like a piece of trash. And he went around with a mega bowl. It was so embarrassing after, 25 years of servicing the cult. He went around asking for employment. It was so embarrassing that eventually the cult took him back and gave him a more menial, lower level job just to avoid the embarrassment because he was such a known face. Anyway.
One more thing about Ken Hoden. He told me he'd been a fighter pilot. I didn't know that.
Yes.
And they reduced him to nothing, which is, of course, the process of Scientology, to take the infinity of the physical universe and reduce it to nothing. And that nothing is, well, life is basically a static, which has no mass. And that's what you are. You're a nothing. And that's what Hubbard will do to you. Terrible.
Yeah.
On with the story. Once upon a time.
So Don Jason. Was Debbie Cook's deputy. Debbie Cook was the commanding officer of the major moneymaker, the money extortion racket, the money raker at the Flag land base called Flag Service Org.
In Clearwater, Florida.
And at that time, late 80s, he was a senior executive. And then something happened. Somebody took services there, went back. Perhaps this was early 1990s. Anyway, they went back and they were very dissatisfied and they just were making noise, making waves. And somehow they trickle this down. There's always got to be a who in Scientology. A who.
Put a head on a pike.
Yes. Who caused that? And ridiculously, although he was a management exec, had nothing to do with the delivery to this person, they pointed the finger at him. You. And this was so ridiculous, so out of the blue sky, that he thought, I'm done. I'm out of here. And he fled. Now, Scientology Inc. has a huge spy operation going on, always.
Yeah, for sure.
You cannot even believe their bill annually for lawyers and PIs. It's in the multi-millions. Millions. They hire private investigators here, there, and everywhere. I am so happy that my husband now is a fully fledged private investigator. Why aren't both my own? Okay. Yes, so the activists, our side of the whistleblowers, have our own in-house private investigator.
Who has already done astonishing work from my point of view. More power to him.
Yes. Well, yes. So he fled and they chased him down and found him. Marty Rathburn was involved because Marty Rathburn, this must have been mid-1990s then, because that's when Marty was in Clearwater studying. And they persuaded him, don't do this. Don't get a declared. You see, they blackmail you with something which is all fake and phony anyway. What is an SB declare? It's a medal of valor.
But they say you'll lose your immortality. How's that going to happen then?
But more so, he did have a sister in the Sea Org. They're going to cut you off from those you love.
Oh, yeah.
That's the blackmail.
Mm.
You will never speak to her again. You will never, ever, you know. So Marty talked him into coming back. But the promise was, let's enhance you. Let's give you tons of auditing training. You do a little bit of what they call manual labor, mess work. You work on the ship a little bit, do some stuff to give you exercise, and we'll enhance you.
Mm.
And against he was conflicted.
Mm.
You know, when you want and you don't want, and you have this inner battle in the mind, he went to Freewinds.
Mm. They
immediately took away his passport. Now that's something.
Let's tell them what the Freewinds is. The Freewinds is their ship which sails. Does it still sail out of the Dutch Antilles in the Caribbean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is where their highest level, Operating Thetan level 8, which gives you total control over everything in the universe, is given. Sadly, it hasn't really worked so far, but you know, but that's where they go. So it's meant to be the, you know, the apogee, is that the right word? The zenith of
pinnacle.
Pinnacle.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So Freewinds has been docked, I believe, for almost a year in a port called Aruba.
Aruba, yeah.
There's the ABCs, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao. And that's the triangle they would do, ABC, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao. They've had some trouble with Curacao, which was their home port. I don't think they're welcome back anymore. Anyway, because of the pandemic and this and that, they're stuck in Aruba. So this is the ship where the wealthy people of Scientology give them thousands of dollars to make the earth a better place. Mm. Notwithstanding that in the United States, there are more killings and murders are up 30% from the previous year. People have been giving money on the pitch. Don't you want Earth to be a safer space for your grandchildren? Yes. Pay up now. Give us your
give us the money. We will stop war, insanity, and crime, which Hubbard it's about 70 years since he first said that, but it hasn't worked very well so far. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, that, as far as I'm concerned, they wage war, they cause insanity, and Scientology is criminal. But maybe absolutely. That's just my opinion. You know,
criminal organization.
Certainly waged war against me for 16 years, no doubt about that.
Well, they took my free labor for 20 years, where I worked for a pittance, and then made preposterous hate pages on me because I speak out. Well, we'll see who gets more statistics. Yeah. Their pages on me or what I have to say on multiple forums. Now, that's a big control mechanism. When your passport is taken away and you're in the non-US, this is something they do in all organizations.
Right from 1968 onwards, it's been quite standard. I mean, Mike Rinder was telling me that when he arrived at the Apollo at the age of 18, in I think 1973, the first thing was his passport was taken away. And the second thing was he was told, no, he wasn't going to be doing the course that he was meant to be doing. And no, he wasn't going to be going home. He was now fundamentally a slave.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way it rolls.
Yeah.
So his passport was taken away and he was locked in a cabin with a camera on him 24/7, 365. If he wanted to use the restroom, he had to wave at the camera. And he was a little bit surprised at how instantly he was locked in from the outside. Instantly, the door was sprung open and was unlocked. And he thought, are they watching me round the clock? There's not even a wait till someone, not even a minute, just instant.
Of course.
So he had to do heavy manual labor. And he was getting, like you said a moment ago, John, interrogatories, police polygraphing, not for his benefit, but to kind of get intelligence data.
What are your crimes? Who's paying you?
Yeah.
Roll back.
Did you have a psychiatric background that we don't know about? Only the psychs would have put you up to this.
Yeah, do you have a blanket bodies?
When you joined staff. They could never conceive that they were so criminal internally to cause someone to want to leave.
No, it's incredible, isn't it? That the idea that if bad things happen to us, then it's because we did bad things. If bad things happen to Ron Hubbard or Scientology, it's because bad people hate them. You know, that there's never any sense of responsibility. And the best apology you'll get from Scientology is the people who did that have been fired. You know, year in, year out, the people who did that have gone. And the people who did that was Ron Hubbard and David Miscavige. They're the cause point. The Germans have this saying. They say a fish stinks from the head down. And I'm afraid that tends to be the truth, that somebody who's meant to have the superpowers of Ron Hubbard should actually have been a bit more observant about the immense criminality of his guardian's office. Well, somehow he didn't notice his powers. And the thought that he had David Mayo for 25 years and hadn't noticed that he was the bird dog in the control room, as he would later say. Just not a very perceptive operating Thetan, Ron Hubbard, as far as I can tell. But there we go.
I coined this phrase, overnight SP. Overnight SP means for 20, 30 years while you slaved for them, you were very appreciated. Or overnight, you become a suppressive person because of speaking out or whatever you do. So Don was absolutely fed up, and the one thing in his mind was escape. But he did call Marty Rathburn, and he really complained. He said, "This is not what I signed up for, and this is not what you promised me. I'm in lockdown, locked from the outside. I'm in a cabin and I'm interrogated." So Marty gave an order, and the lock outside was released. So he could come and go. He wasn't in a locked cabin, but he still had no passport. And there was no way to, he had $20 and a few checks. That's all he had in the world. You see, the control mechanism is, you can't leave. You're on some banana island in the Caribbean, and there's no, you can't travel if they hold your passport. This is their control. Why are they so worried? If you want to leave, here's the door. Don't hit your behind as you walk out. Go. You're not going to play the game. You're not going to. But no, they want to control. So he thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And there are wires, very taut cables that hold the ship to the dock. But they do slacken depending on the tides. And I believe at high tide, they become really taut. Now, Don had been doing manual labor for some months now. And he could think like a contractor, handyman. And he figured out that if he, he had to make the escape really fast because there's security at the gangplank to the security. You can't just run off a ship without being noticed. And he figured out, if I'm going to send pictures to Spike so that there are pictures,
Yep.
he thought of some kind of contraption that he could hold on to and slide down the taut wire, bypassing the formal gangway to the ship and everything.
So there's a device called a bosun's chair that was used to rescue people from shipwrecks, where you fired a line out and somebody would be able to slide back along it. So he made something like that, I imagine.
Right. And he realized this is the point of no return. This escape was. And the tide came in and the cable was very, very taut. And he jumped on and he rolled down and he grabbed a taxi and said, take me to the airport. And he was immediately pursued. And they, at a red light, they told the taxi driver, it's illegal. He has no permission to leave the ship. Stop, let him off. And the taxi driver's caught between, and Dunn said, they were holding me against my will. Now, he had $20, but he had no passport. But he had to, now this was before 9/11, which was 2001. Now they would never allow you. It's gotten so much tighter because terrorists have blown up airplanes and stuff. But he convinced them to let him fly with no ID. He didn't have a driver's license, didn't have a passport. You could never get on a plane giving a verbal story like that. Although now I do believe airlines have become so hip to the cult of Scientology that if you say, I'm fleeing from a cult, they have my passport. We've actually called a couple of airlines in all the work done behind the scenes for fleeing people to ask, would they let such and such a person on a plane if they said, Scientology is holding my passport? And the airlines have given a green light and said, in that kind of thing, they would be willing to bend. Even airlines know about the cult's criminality in kidnapping and held against will.
Yeah, we had an underground railroad working in East Grinstead because this was back in the 90s. Because what was happening was they were going and recruiting in third world countries and making all sorts of promises. And I had a guy who was from Ethiopia, wonderful guy. And they said he was a Christian, and they said, oh, it's a church. Yeah, you'll be able to you'll be trained in your religion. And he arrives at St. Hill. They've got his passport. He can't afford a plane ticket back to Ethiopia, given that, the average wage there is about $10 a week. And he was stuck for 18 months. And during that 18 months, he carefully collected pieces of paper that were going around him. And he came to me with a stack of paper this deep.
Wow.
And I had to say to him, I can't take that because it's stolen. I can take photocopies of it, so somebody else copied it. And I think we had 3 front pages from this dreadful material that came out with them, the way they were treating people. We also had 4 people who were from Zimbabwe. And the first one, they actually threw him out. They just threw him on the street. And he ended up with me. And he'd call his friends up and he'd talk to them in Davali, the language they have. So, of course, nobody around understood that he was telling them how dreadful Scientology was. So the next Saturday, we had 3 more Zimbabweans who wanted to go home. We had a guy from Latvia who was, from Estonia, who was he was a pilot. He trained pilots, and they'd conned him into coming over. And again, the weekly wage back then was about $15 a week. He couldn't afford to go home. And we'd have people putting up posters that were at the bus where they dropped people off in town when they were allowed a Saturday morning off. and they'd be in the language of the people who'd been, basically tricked into this, so they could come to us. We had a whole operation running with the various Christian churches where they put people up, pay for them to go home. But the amount of people who were trapped inside it, the way of deceiving people into joining, and then at the other end you look at the security at Gilman Hot Springs, their secret international base, with razor wire all around the perimeter and touch sensitive pads and security guards riding around, and which is to keep people in. I talked with a woman who'd managed to escape, and she'd said that, they're wherever they are, they're being watched, and you have to be able to know where the cameras are so you can get around them and get enough of a start so they won't catch you. As you're saying, this is an unusual thing for a religion.
Blow, escape, exit, run away, and be persuaded. Only in Scientology. I heard a darling story where East Grinstead cab drivers, if you're escaping and blowing, they won't charge you.
Oh.
I really got this from a credible source. They now know how to park where they're not in camera, visio, whatever it is, but they're not even charging. Just let me interject Don Jason's story, a lovely little story, which then I want is on authoritarian control. There was a girl, quite well, her husband and her were quite wealthy. She had some horrible experience at Los Angeles Advanced Org, where she was running some implants and her heart started fluttering and her button was death. Her button mean that which she had baggage on, that which she had fear and
triggered her
was death. So she fled AOLA, went back to her home, Southern California, and because she had wealth, a team of people descended on her after studying her confessionals to find out that death was a trigger. And they threatened her, saying, "You're going to be dead in a week. You're going to die. You've stirred up some stuff. You need to go to Flag to sort it out." And the way they were so clever using death as a weapon, she went to Flag.
You have the folder error summaries, something that you were very familiar with, where
go ahead.
Go through the folder and what they're looking for. And this is something that intrigues me, that the idea that so many people who've been involved with Scientology are convinced that Ron Hubbard knew nothing about the evil deeds. And you're sort of going, well, it's about 1996, we put all 800 pages of the information full hat on the internet. So it's there. And there's a thing called L. Ron Hubbard's Conference with the Investigators. So this is a transcript of a recording of Hubbard. And when you look at the actual materials, you find that he not only knew about these things, he directed them. And one of them is this thing of finding love and hate buttons, so that you will find out what somebody likes or doesn't like. So if you find that somebody's homophobic, that's a very easy example. And you want to split them from their supporters and their friends, then you have a whispering campaign to say that their friends are actually gay or something like this. They create this really, I did often say that during the 16 years that I was being harassed on a daily basis, pretty much, that it was like being in a John le Carre novel, but the characters chasing you were the Marx Brothers, because their incompetence was just, as soon as they got close to catching you, their attention would shoot off onto something else. And That could be because, as Ron Hubbard says, people who've committed overt transgressions have very low levels of perception. And that was certainly my experience in dealing with Branch 1, that they were incredibly incompetent. I was told by the former head of the investigation bureau in the UK, that they had racked up £2 million in debt to the main body of the cult, harassing me. £2 million just to harass me.
£2 million.
Yeah, but what your donations buy, what your tax-free religious donations are paying for, ridiculous. And it didn't work because I'm still here.
Alive and well.
Alive and well. Indeed, actually.
So this girl who had fear of death was at flag, but her folders hadn't come. And she was there a whole week without any kind of counseling. And yet they told her she'd be dead in a week. And she was making desperate calls to her husband on how miserable she was. Nothing was happening. And there were some, they couldn't find the folders. There was some airline may have sent it to the wrong, whatever it was. There was this 1 week delay of no folders. Meanwhile,
and the folders are the record of all of her auditing, all of her counseling.
Folders mean everything you say in session is written down and videotaped. Yeah. And the folder is the consecutive daily, every counseling session you had, it's written down.
Yeah.
There's the folders. So the folders hadn't come, so she didn't get any counseling, but she was getting high pressure demand for money for 7 days. And her husband got fed up of hearing the complaints. And he said, look, just leave. I can't hear this every day. Get to Tampa Airport. I'll have a ticket ready for you. Go. And she said, but all my designer clothes are at the sandcastle and my makeup. Leave your designer clothes. Get the next taxi on the Fort Harrison Avenue and go. And as luck would have it, she stepped out. People don't think you're leaving when you have no luggage. And, you know, she passed the security a little further down. She flagged down taxis. It's Fort Harrison Avenue, where the Clearwater structure is such a main, it's like Fifth Avenue. Every 5 seconds, there's a cab. So she found a cab and she was frantic. And she said, Tampa Airport. And he was a charming, big, black guy. And he looked at her and he said, Tampa Airport, no luggage? And she said, yes, please, go fast, Tampa Airport. And he took his head right out of the window and looked upward at the Fort Harrison and he went, Scientology, Tampa Airport, no luggage. He knew when people went frantically, Tampa Airport, no luggage, Scientology, fleeing from Scientology. Even the cab drivers knew Tampa Airport, no luggage meant a flight, an escape. Can you imagine? This seeps into the culture. The airlines, the cab drivers, they know. They know people are fleeing and escaping the monster.
And Scientology policy is that you, maintain friendly relations with the public and the environment. When I left in 1983 and started talking with business people and shopkeepers in East Grinstead, I was truly shocked at the reputation that Scientology had. There was a chamber of commerce where the businessmen all get together and it had been taken over by Scientology. So I had a friend who ran a shop on the high street in East Grinstead, and he worked out there weren't any businesses on the high street that were owned by Scientology. Now, around the corner, you've got Clear Jewelry on London Road. I mean, who wants Clear Jewelry? You can't even see it. And they formed their own chamber of commerce, so they wouldn't have any Scientologists on it. I mean, one year, my friend Maria Flint, she managed to get onto the chamber. This is while I was still involved. And she had them, they did the Christmas lights, and they found these things that were like Scientology crosses and these great big lights. But I went to, it was a law firm called Mason and Beer, and they remembered having been declared suppressive in 1965. And just the whole town, there was this fear. Shopkeepers, I remember going into a tailor's shop, and the guy looked around to make sure there was nobody else in the shop. It was his shop, he knew there was nobody else there, shook my hand and thanked me for writing A Piece of Blue Sky, and said, what a dreadful thing Scientology is. It's created such a stink wherever it's gone. Really, I'm reading this great book. I'm going to hold this up. Spike will doubtless find us an image of it. Had the good fortune to give a talk at Dr. Bandy Lee and Dr. Ruth Ben-Ghiat's town hall for Truth and Restoration. And I was so impressed by Ruth Ben-Ghiat, I thought, well, I'd better read one of her books. And this book, Strongman, she's an expert on Mussolini and on Italian culture. And she's basically made a comparison between a variety of authoritarian leaders, including Berlusconi, Gaddafi, Hitler, and showing that they have these same characteristics. And I must say that I'm about halfway through the book now, and Ron Hubbard could have made it to this book. This controlling behavior, this, getting rid of the people who are closest to you, always keeping people in trepidation and fear of what's going to happen. And outwardly, of course, having this false enthusiasm, that has to be broadcast. When I left, after 9 years of involvement, I was ashamed when finally, former Sea Organization people told me that they'd been on a rice and beans diet for months on end. I will never forget one of them saying, but sometimes on a Sunday, we got a baked potato with cheese. And I couldn't live for a day on rice and beans, let alone 6 months. Yeah. Finding out what was happening on the rehabilitation project force, where when you remember, you're told, oh, yeah, it's great, and it sorts you out. And realizing how many people were actually broken by the RPF, actually tamed, and just became completely obedient to whatever they were ordered to do. So that it's like a concentration camp. This isn't a way of liberating people. It's absolutely the opposite of what it claims to be.
The intention of Scientology is to make you into a dot, to shrink you, to take away all power. As soon as you fall into disgrace, they move forward to crush you. And there's so much evil in that. Calling yourself a church, wanting to be respected for ecclesiastical stuff, while they behave diabolically inside. John, I was in 40 years. And they killed my son. They killed him by forcing disconnection when he had walking pneumonia. And he died at 27 years old due to their malicious, hateful policy of disconnection.
Yeah, he died of something that could have been treated if you'd been able to get to him. Yeah. And so many cases of that, dozens and dozens of cases of people whose lives were destroyed through their involvement with Scientology and Ron Hubbard. And always these promises, you're going to be a superhuman, you're going to have this fantastic intelligence, you'll never catch a cold again, let alone COVID-19. And it's all an illusion. You're just being sold a nonsense. Hubbard, in a lecture in the 50s, said that his favorite book was by a guy called William Belitho. It's called 12 Against the Gods, published in the 1930s. Fascinating book. And it's about people who are mavericks, a word that Hubbard liked to use about himself, largely people who were fraudsters. And that was where I first read about Cagliostro. Cagliostro and Serafina, this astonishing con man of the 18th century, who had traveled around Europe and had the crown princes and heads of state all eating out of his hand, until eventually he ended his life in prison, where he and his consort Serafina spent their time confessing about what the other one had done to scam people. And it seemed like such a Ron Hubbard sort of story, that what he'd done was he'd managed to sell people the idea of complete self-determinism. And then you look to the Sea Org contract, and it's, I promise to uphold and follow command intention. So for the next 1,000 million years, you're going to give up any self-determination and do what Ron says. And
Yes.
These conflicts, these contradictions, the double binds of Scientology, they hold the whole thing together. I mean, originally, my book, Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, one of its titles along the way, and Russell Miller's book still lists it as this, is Hubbard Through the Looking Glass, because I think the realization is he did the opposite of what he claimed. Scientology isn't a religion, it's an intelligence agency. It's a way of gathering information on you so that you will become a compliant slave. It's most certainly not a way of liberating people. And it really does not deliver what it promises. You know, we always deliver what we promise. No, Scientology never delivers what it promises. It just, and as soon as, I mean, the other thing, I did a lot of work on my friend Steve Bisbee back in 1984. We started going, an awful lot of people have died from cancer in Scientology. And Steve was sort of thinking, well, is this something to do with the auditing? Is this actually triggering cancer in people? I was a little, at first I think I thought that could be true. But the more I looked at it, it seemed that it was because Scientology was promising that it could do anything, cure anything, that people didn't get treatment in time. And they just kept on, ending up in the Hoxie clinic or somewhere where they'd been rejected. Brown McKee talked about taking his wife there when she was, to one of the clinics in Mexico, and finding the waiting room was full of Scientology OTs with cancer, because, they were going to follow this generally fraudulent treatment, with apricot kernels or something like this, rather than, that's a popular one, isn't it? Which are in fact poisonous. You shouldn't eat more than 2 a day of the things, there you go. Cyanide, it's not good for you. But this smoke and mirrors. I remember a lovely woman called Christina Haas, who was this really jolly German woman who made some kind of living by baking bread and selling it to people. And she was just she was a joy. There are some people, they're just so full of cheer and enthusiasm. And she was shipped away because she got cancer. And she ended up, I later talked to the woman who had baby watched her, just to make sure that she didn't contact any Scientologists. And she ended up being cared for by Buddhist monks, because Scientology had just thrown her away, as they do with anybody who gets too old in this organization. They're just pushed out on the street, no pension, no health benefits, nothing. It's an appalling racket. It really is.
It's a racket. It's a racket. Yeah. So back to the story of Don.
Story of Don.
When he gets on the little aircraft from Aruba to Miami, immediately the seat beside him had an OSA operative called Ludwig Alpers. Okay. They had determined, Aruba is relatively small. They knew the airport, but they even got the seat right next to him. So Aruba to Miami, Ludwig was trying his best to persuade. And they must have been in fear of what Don could state. of what he knew about. He wasn't in some sensitive area. He was just managing flag servicehold. Well, that didn't get anywhere. So Ludwig had been in touch with Marty, and now he had to pitch to the airline that he had no passport. He could write them a check, but he needed to go to Atlanta with no documentation. Somehow he persuaded Immigration and Customs as he arrived from Aruba. I mean, he's an all-American boy, you know, with a total American accent. They could tell that he wasn't some imposter. And they let him through. Now, from Miami to Atlanta, he had Marty Rathbun. And Marty would not give up on him. Marty had already got him back once. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Shame on me.
And Don was just adamant. He did what Marty said. He went to Freewinds. He was in prison. And so Marty was on the plane doing high-level persuasion. And then Marty even followed him as he came off the plane, still thinking he could turn him around, and was constantly on the phone, probably reporting to Miscavige. Oh, at one point, Marty said to him, David Miscavige wants to talk to you. And he said, I have nothing to say to Miscavige, nothing. By then, he was burned out. But he did get on the phone, and he said to his mother, and he said, hey, Mom, will you welcome your son back for a Thanksgiving dinner? It was the eve of Thanksgiving. So he was this Thanksgiving surprise to his mom. And this is the only story, John, where somebody had the wits and the skill to get off Freewinds. I'm going to show a real picture here. There's a triumphant picture of the actual tool he used to use the cable.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so after 12 years of being a top exec, let's examine, and I love what you said, what kind of outfit where people are so desperate? You see, Don had thought of hurling himself over, but 4 stories down, water is like cement when you hit it from a high. When you, it's not all, it looks like soft and malleable, but water can be hard. You can break it, your leg, your knee. He did a very daring thing because at any rate he could have, but that's the level of desperation. To get out of the, to get out of the mind control, get out of the misery, the absolute misery of being controlled every moment of the day. I've never been able to get over the control over me on the running program.
Yes.
This is a baloney. Did we discuss it before, the running program?
We have mentioned it. I think I said that when I first met David Mayo back in 1986, I found him really cold. I couldn't understand why he was so cold. And later on, it dawned on me that having run round a pole at over 100 degrees in the desert, day in and day out, this had affected his gums. The dehydration had affected his gums. And the reason he couldn't smile was because he couldn't smile, because the dental work he was having to, and I didn't see him for years. And in 2013, he called me up and we talked for 3 hours. And it was really strange because I'd spent several weeks around him in 86 and 88. And he just seemed like a cold fish to me, though he was very good in interview and very helpful and very open. In fact, perhaps a bit too open in terms of the court cases he had going on. So I had to keep quiet about a few of the things he told me, until that was all over. but when I talked with him in 2013, he was just this delightful, intelligent man, and he could smile again. But that was the running program. That was this utterly destructive, humiliating creation of L. Ron Hubbard as a way of breaking people and making them, enslaved and compliant, and with no backflash, no spirit left to answer back. That was the idea. How long were you on it for?
3 months.
Whoa!
But I was on 12 hours a day. At that time, it was 12 hours a day. And I read the theory of Hubbard's secret theory behind this. And what Hubbard said was many billion years ago, trillion years ago,
in another galaxy,
far, far away, he was pursuing a criminal. And it's not quite sure how he was pursuing, but it looked like it was a pursuit, like a chase. And after a long, long time of running, he was running, the target was running. Hubbard caught up with him, and lo and behold, this bad criminal was suddenly saved. And Hubbard had this paradigm shift. If you run, you will flip from being evil to good. It's preposterous. It's just
why long distance runners are the best people in the world. I can't imagine L. Ron Hubbard running. Was he able to run?
Never did.
Sort of lazy.
He didn't even do the purification right now. He did not. He doled it out, but he didn't do it.
Oh no.
So I had to do 12 hours a day, and it was the worst, one of the lowest points of my life.
Yeah.
Because every second had been now controlled. I didn't want to do this, but I had to put one foot forward, and keep running and running. No one can run 12 hours a day, not even athletes.
Yeah.
So you were allowed to take little breaks, but the supervisors were constantly saying, get back on the track, get back. And you're so obedient, and you're such a slave that you believe in all this, and you go back. And it was just, so that's a high control punishment. David Mayo, when you went, I loved this man. I love this man. Did he tell you about the assassination in that 3-hour conversation? Did he tell you about the hit?
Yes, he did. Yeah, and the hitman saying, I can't do this, you're such a nice man.
Yeah, no. Well, David was brilliant in understanding the mind. And Scientology had hired a hitman. People don't believe that a cult can do this, or any church, or anyone claiming ecclesiastical privileges can hire a hitman. The guy arrived. I think he had a shotgun. The gun was very long and visible. And David and him got in communication. If anyone can have empathy and understand the other person, David could. I don't know what a remarkable conversation they must have had, because the hitman was hired to execute David Mayo. The only enemy in the world, the only enemy was the cult of Scientology. So this hitman wasn't there from some neighbor.
No.
This was Scientology, and they've done this a few times. And David was able to persuade the assassin to leave and not kill him. He's told the story over and over. It's almost like he was trying to get it out of his system. Did he tell you any other details?
It's a while ago. It was in the Dominican Republic, wasn't it, when he was there? But no, I mean, the thing I tried to get out of David and sadly didn't was in in 86, I interviewed Virginia Downsborough, and she told me this story of Hubbard summoning her in 1966 to Gran Canaria, where he had been researching OT3, the wall of fire, the Xenu and the body Thetans. And she arrived and she said he was completely out of his mind. He hadn't eaten for days and he was living off a shelf full of drugs. And she held her hands out to show me how many bottles of pills there had been. And I sort of said, what were they? And she was on. I went back in 88, I interviewed her again, and she still wouldn't tell me what they were in. And I mentioned this in the conversation in 2013 with David. He said, oh, before she died, Virginia told me. and I kept writing to him and saying, tell me, because it would be interesting to know. And I'm afraid the secret died with him, that I was able to work out that there would have been amphetamines, barbiturates, and he took Demerol, which was an opiate medicine, and he would mix them all together and have crazy experiences. Did I tell you about it? I actually, as I was kind of coming away from it all in 1984, I met Jerry Armstrong for the first time. It was June, end of June, beginning of July 1984. And Jerry said, well, Hubbard was taking phenobarbital when he was on drugs when he did OT3. And it just so happened that the week before, I'd loaned an OT3 pack to a friend of mine. And this was the first time I'd let anyone see an OT3 pack because I was still halfway into it, I suppose. And he'd done OT2 and he was wondering whether to buy a Ducati motorcycle for £500 or to buy OT3 or Advanced Ability 3, as it would have been called in the independents. And so I said, look, read the pack, make your own mind up. And he came back to me and I just got back from meeting Jerry for the first time. And I said, Jerry said that Hubbard was on drugs when he did OT3. And he handed me the pack back and he said, yeah, phenobarbital. And I stopped and went, hang on a minute. How are you able to name that? That's the drug that Jerry named, and there are a lot of drugs. And he said, when I was 15, I joined the Navy because I wanted to travel the world and take every drug there was. If you take phenobarbital in excessive amounts, barbiturate, membutol, phenobarbital, then you feel you're shattered, exploded into thousands of little beings. And he said, as soon as he read the pack, he was like, this guy was taking barbiturates. And yeah, that was a really strange experience to kind of burst through that thing and say, oh, the man was just crazy. This isn't a cure for anything,
I run a forum on Facebook called Outer Banks, mostly ex-staff. And the daughter of Virginia Downsborough is a member. She's quite a bit of nice. I didn't particularly know Virginia Downsborough, but so I've never really asked her, but I'd like to hook you up with her.
Yes.
In case her mom told her these, the unanswered question that you have had. Who knows? She seemed to really want to talk about Virginia. Sadly, people are a much later generation than Virginia. You've got to go back to the 60s, no, to have known Virginia. So people haven't asked. She's, even when she first joined, she said, I'd like to answer questions on Virginia, blah, blah, blah. But nobody took her up on it because Virginia was an unknown. For the first time, I meet someone who actually knew Virginia. So by all means,
that'd be great.
Let me hook up Virginia's daughter with you. She would love that. Yeah. So within a little later today, you'll get a new friend. And
the interesting thing is Virginia Downsborough was the first person to be asked to join the Sea Project, which would become the sea organization. 20 people were asked to join, 19 did, including Neville Chamberlain, and I think Otto Roast was in the first draft. But Virginia said, though she, having seen what she'd seen, that no, thank you, she wasn't going to join the sea project.
She didn't join.
But when I interviewed her, I had a friend with me, and he started raising his voice a little bit because he was quite excited by this information. She went, "Shh, I've got people doing OT3 in the next room." Even knowing this thing, I mean, and OT3 is the maddest thing, isn't it? It's just this absolute madness. You've got this auditor's code which says you never evaluate for the pre-cliff. When you're telling them when it happened, what was done to them, it's just completely in conflict. It's another of those double binds where you're told what to think. And what
you're supposed to run it. It's called Incident 2.
Yeah.
And it's the second major.
25 million years ago in this sector of the universe, Luke Skywalker and his friends. Sorry.
Really bog on it badly. They bog on it. They leave Scientology. Then there's I'm going to send Spike to put it up on the screen. After years of pain, and then they feel upset, deeply upset, and they don't know what to do, and they're struggling on OT3. When you finally get to Net for OTs, there's a correction list. A correction list is a list of questions read to you with great impingement to see what meta phenomena occurs. And based on that, you're handled. And do you know that the Solo Nuts correction list has these 2 lines? You never had an incident 2.
Yep.
You never had an incident 1. So the correction list admits, after taking big bucks from you to do OT3 incident 2, that you may never have even had it. You were in a different sector of the universe.
Exactly.
So,
we had this whole thing in the late 70s of the natural clear, and I attested to natural clear. The question on the list is, have you always been clear? Question 46 on the list. And that's what my, and the EME to respond to that, I've always been clear, and I was clear number 17876, though of course there were never that many clears issued. They just issued batches of numbers to organizations. And when I get to OT3, it's sort of going, well, hang on a minute, incident 2, the 75 million year ago incident where we were blown up in volcanoes, having been hoovered up by Xenu and from 76 planets surrounding the Earth, and collected on electronic ribbons and all of this nonsense. That would be the incident that actually gave you what Hubbard called the R6 bank, the reactive mind. So if you're a natural clear, you wouldn't have incident 2. You also wouldn't have the kind of magnet that attracted the body thetans to you. So I didn't do well on the body thetan stuff, but I met people who did a lot worse. When I first got involved in Scientology, there was a wonderful young woman who was running the Birmingham mission, and she was ebullient. She was just one of these gorgeous, cheerful, happy people. I didn't see her for 4 years. When I saw her again, and I was doing OT levels, it was as if she was made of stone. She was so distressed. She was so upset. And for a brief period after I left, she left, and she told me she'd never been able to find a body thetan. And this had just crushed her into thinking there was something wrong with her. But the most incredible case was the woman who owned the Birmingham mission, Stephanie Ryburn, who wasn't there when I first got in. She was on a tour of the US with her husband, Don, going to missions there to try and find out why they were making so much money, why people like Kingsley Wimbush and Ben Corrigan and Martin Samuels were making fistfuls of money, because there was, nothing was happening in Britain at all. Nobody was getting involved. And when they got back, Stephanie always seemed to look at me with disdain. She never smiled at me. And I thought it was because I had long hair or something like that. And then you've got this thought, oh, she's done OT levels. Maybe she's reading my mind. And as soon as you think somebody's reading your mind, all sorts of things start happening. And she just never smiled at me. She never called me by name. She had been trained on the Class 8 course where you learn how to supervise operating Thetan level 3. She'd done the course with Ron Hubbard on the ship. So there were no excuses about her training not being good. And the years went by. And so 7 years went by. And I'm down in East Grinstead. I am now doing new era Dianetics for Operating Thetans, NED for OTs, the new OT5. And she comes out of the waiting room, grinning her head off at me, calls me by name for the first time ever. And she said, isn't it fantastic that Ron's come up with something that fixes the mess that OT3 makes? And she'd had 15 years by then of being trapped in this thing. It's not a good thing, is it, really, Scientology?
She said some truth there.
Yeah.
For OT5 is essentially a repair.
But the problem is there are no body thetans, and so essentially it's another way of messing you up.
Oh, God. This whole, if anyone can create a scam, Scientology can. They have, if you're originating something to do with Clear, you pay them $5,000 to do what they call clear certainty rundown.
Clear certainty rundown.
I know a person who's had 8 of them, $40,000.
Still not certain.
Because the rundown is supposed to establish one way or the other. And you're sent to a test, and then a latest case supervisor comes back and cancels your Clear.
Yeah.
People have it on and off, on and off. You're clear, you're not. This is just a hullabaloo of money extortion. Money extortion.
Well, I talked with Lillian Collins, who is the wife of the head of Collins Publishers, which was at the time the largest publisher in the world. It became HarperCollins when it merged with Harper and Row. And she said to me that she'd always wondered was that she needed twice as long on every auditing procedure as anybody else. And how did it come to be that she'd spent £1 million on Scientology? And she'd realized it's because she'd got the money. Looking for there's one of the songs on The Road to Freedom, that really dreadful album that Hubbard had Chick Carriere make with him. It's got this thing about the priestly begons or something, some Hubbard lyric about priests selling you this idea that you're inhabited with demons. And I remember I'd left by the time I heard this and kind of going, okay, so here he's admitting it. He's saying it's a con, telling people they're infested with demons or body thetans. And he's quite happy criticizing them. And then he talks about the evil being who had to hide. And you're going, he was in hiding for the last 5 years of his life, But still, he also did sing Thank You for Listening. And what a treat that is. I write just for you, even though I don't know your name. And I don't have a clue. What a lovely man. Oh, dear. Still, we've probably come to the end of another episode, haven't we? Well, let's end on a win.
End on a win?
Yeah, we should. Well, let's would you like others to have the gains that you've had from this conversation?
It really is a win. The best win you can have is to just flourish and do exceptionally well. People of my age who are on the Apollo with me are just dying of cancer, of heart attacks, of diabetes. And at my age, I'm old now. at my age,
You'll never be old, Karen.
I've never been more healthy. I've never been more mentally alert and sharp. And I've got my whole universe of my animals. I'm very much into animal rescue, animal abuse, plugged into all the animal things. And I have such joy connecting with nature. So that 40 years, I'm determined to keep talking about, exposing. Maybe sometimes we help some person. You see, what's so good about these videos is long after I'm dead and gone, long after you're dead and gone, YouTube doesn't take down these videos. I was watching some guy I happened to do a show with video on. He killed himself a year later. He talked to Tom Cruise on the video, and it was, Tom, can you wake up? Can you stop shilling for some? Can you stop? Examine both, it was almost a lecture, a reprimand, like a stern school teacher or principal rapping Tom Cruise's behind with a stick saying, you bad boy, stop it. Stop
out of it.
Yes. And a year later, he killed himself. But his videos that he made 2 or 3 videos on his own denouncing Scientology's darker side. He died about 8 years ago, and his videos are, and I thought, oh my God, that gave me like the videos never come down. You see, you don't have to have an account that you pay for. You have to have an account with YouTube, but there's no monthly. If there's a monthly payment, once you die and stop paying, that site could come down because you're not paying. If you have a GoDaddy WordPress account or something, you stop paying, boom, the account comes down. Not with YouTube. There's no money. Just give the video and it's there eternally.
And there are people who, I mean, when Andreas Heldel Lunt started Xenu.net, it was because he realized that websites were being taken down by someone. Yeah. He'd never been involved. He's just this absolutely lovely human being.
Oh, he's great.
And there he was, and he said, okay, I'll mirror everything, whatever goes up. And for many years he did. And the same will be true with these videos. There will be people who'll download them so that, whatever happens, that, we create a legacy. And, it was great for me because I was not involved in 1996. I'd just been steamrolled. I'd been completely flattened by the Scientology harassment machine. As the late Arnie Lerma said before the internet and safety in numbers, there was John Atack. It was something like
$2 million worth of harassment to kill you. $2 million.
From then,
$2 million.
Yeah, £2 million, about $2.5 million. But from 1996 to late 2012, I made no public statements at all. I didn't read anything. I didn't do anything. When I started writing for the Underground Bunker with Tony Ortega, I was really quite shocked that there were all these comments where people were saying, how much my work had benefited their lives, because, I just walked away from it. The publisher didn't pay me royalties, bastards. And I had no connection with it. So, and I think my favorite was when Jesse Prince put something up and he said it'd take him 6 years before he dared lift the cover of Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky. The content could be so frightening. I mean, Scientology can make you really fearful. It doesn't make you into a super being who can open the cover of any book, and dare to read anything. It took him 6 years, and he then said, and now I've read it 3 times, and everybody should read it 3 times. Yeah. And that's such a wonderful thought, that if anybody has benefited from the struggle, the years that we've spent, then it's worthwhile. And I'll add to what you said, which is I'm 66 years old, and is there life after Scientology? I left 38 years ago, come next month, and I have to say that this period of my life is definitely the happiest and the best. So don't worry about losing your immortality. It'll be fine,
Oh, I'm completely fearless about that.
Yeah.
John, it's always, always good to hang with you, my dear John.
Yes, it's a
And
pleasure.
I really value our friendship, and I think the world of you. And let's sell some more books. I want Spike to put it up here. This is a riveting book. This is a spellbinding book. Highly, highly recommended. And your new book, John?
Opening Our Minds.
What a great title. What a great title. Great title. Okay, guys, please continue to be our audience. Please make a little donation if you can. Do a little Patreon, even if it's $5 a month.
We don't, if it could be $5 million a month, we don't mind. You know, we won't tell you off.
All right.
Great. Thank
Bye,
you so much, Karen.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.
Cyanide, it's not good for you.